Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made an interesting statement regarding what Ukraine is using to strike Russian territory. According to the president, by examining the debris at the crash sites, it is clear that Ukraine is striking targets in the aggressor country not only with drones. The president made this statement at a joint press conference with Dutch Prime Minister Mark Rutte in Kyiv. In particular, the president was asked whether he could confirm that Ukrainian Flamingo cruise missiles are already hitting targets on Russian territory.
I think that I truly believe that we will eventually move to publicly disclosing the comprehensive details of our long-range capabilities a bit later. We won't prepare, accordingly, the enemy for where we are, what we've achieved, and what we are using. The main thing to understand is that in recent days, Ukraine has been using exclusively Ukrainian-made products, not just drones.
According to The Economist, Ukraine is already actively using its Flamingo missiles, which possess a substantial warhead weighing 1,150 kilograms, to effectively strike Russian oil refineries. The head of the company Firepoint, which manufactures Flamingo missiles, notes an increase in the production of these missiles. In particular, about 50 missiles are produced per month. The president added that he would like to thank not only the soldiers for hitting the targets, but also the manufacturers who took the necessary steps.
We truly believe that we have significantly increased our overall capabilities. This volume depends on this amount, whether the appropriate funds will be available.
In this regard, the production capacity for missiles and drones in Ukraine could reach $35 billion in 2026. President Zelensky noted that the necessary financial funds could potentially come from international partners with whom Ukraine has already signed comprehensive bilateral security agreements. There are already 30 such agreements. Meanwhile, in Russia, explosions are occurring almost daily at industrial facilities and oil refineries. And recently, Ukraine carried out one of its longest-range strikes on a Russian oil refinery located 1,400 kilometers from the border. On Friday, October 3rd, drones attacked the Orsk-Neftorsk-Syntes oil refinery in the Orenburg region.
A series of powerful explosions rocked temporarily occupied Crimea on the night of October 6. According to the Telegram channel Crimean Wind, the Saki airfield in Novofedorivka was the first to come under attack. Soon reports came in about explosions in Feodosia, Yevpatoria, the Simferopol district, as well as near the village of Andreevka, next to which the Kacha airfield is located. Later, Crimean Wind reported that an oil depot in Feodosia had been hit.
There, after the powerful explosions, the oil depot over there is still blazing fiercely.
According to the channel, as a result of the strike, a fuel tank exploded at the Feodosia oil terminal. The glow from the massive fire can be seen for dozens of kilometers. In addition, there are reports of a strike on a military unit between Yevpatoria and the village of Uyutnoye. There, according to preliminary information, one of the radars was damaged. Later, more than a dozen explosions were heard in Sevastopol. The oil depot in Feodosia had already been attacked in October of last year. It is the largest one in the temporarily occupied Crimea. On October 6, drones also attacked the Russian city of Dzerzhinsk.
He's just here.
He's actually here?
He's right above these buildings.
According to preliminary reports, a fire broke out at the Sverdlov plant, which is one of Russia's largest manufacturers of industrial explosives. On the evening of October 5th, a series of explosions rocked the Russian city of Belgorod, after which the city lost power.
Behind the large blue building. Oh my goodness. The power's really out again, it appears to be.
A power outage was confirmed by Belgorod region's governor, Vyacheslav Gladkov.
Here we have, a significant disruption to the power supply in 7 municipalities. Almost 40,000 people as of right now, at this very moment, are without electricity.
Local residents currently report that there are disruptions with essential water supply and internet. The next Republican candidate for President of the United States could be Vice President J.D. Vance. This was stated by U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio in an interview with Fox News. The host asked Rubio whether he would run in the 2028 election. However, the Secretary of State replied that it would be Vance if he wants it.
I firmly believe that the next Republican candidate for the presidency will be Vice President Vance if he ultimately decides to run for the office. And he is a good friend of mine, and he is doing an excellent job.
Vance himself does not rule out the possibility of running for president in 2028. He hinted at this recently in one of his interviews.
I genuinely do not like to think about that particular aspect, primarily because I much prefer to consistently focus on the important job I currently have right now. If we manage to do an excellent job in the upcoming years of 2025 and 2026, then we can properly talk about the intricate world of politics in 2027. Americans are tired of those who, just 7 months into a new job, are already thinking about the next one.
In the spring of this year, Michigan Congresswoman Shri Thanedar introduced articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump in the U.S. House of Representatives.
I introduced articles of impeachment against President Trump. When Trump ignores the Constitution, Congress, and the courts, he is not fighting for America. He is destroying it and putting our democracy at risk.
The congressman clarified he had filed 7 articles of impeachment against Trump, accusing him of violations.
Article 7, tyrannical abuse of power. Trump is trying to concentrate unlimited power and destroy the constitutional limits of the presidency. In our country, we have presidents, not kings. This is not just a simple offense. This is an offense that warrants impeachment.
Earlier, in April 2025, thousands of protesters gathered across the United States, including in Washington, expressing their disagreement with President Donald Trump's policies.
The self-proclaimed president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, has revealed what the Oreshnik looks like. With a high degree of probability, the type of launcher for this medium-range missile has been disclosed. This happened thanks to the Belarusian dictator's desire to show off its model, as noted by journalists from Defense Express. The model was deliberately displayed in Lukashenko's office during a meeting with the Prime Minister of Kyrgyzstan and was quite conspicuously positioned for the cameras. In the end, they even had to take a photo with a very peculiar composition where the people had to be placed in the corner of the frame. Thanks to Lukashenko's boasting, experts were able to examine the Oreshnik launcher itself. In particular, it can now be definitively stated that the Oreshnik's chassis is the MZKT 79291 from the Belarusian Minsk wheel tractor plant. By the way, all of Russia's ground-based strategic missile systems depend on the products of this very enterprise, as well as a number of other missile systems, including the Iskander and the RS-26 Rubezh. Based on this approximate ratio, it can be cautiously assumed that the weight of the Oreshnik, which is most likely the same as the RS-26 Rubezh, is about 45 to 48 tons together with the TPK-I 4043, or without it. It should also be noted that the Oreshnik is at least 7 years old, as shown by the analysis of the debris. On August 1st, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin stated that the first serial Oreshnik system had allegedly entered service with the army of the aggressor country, Russia. The Russian dictator also claims that a site for the system has already been chosen in Belarus and that the issue will be resolved by the end of the year. Recall that the launch of the Oreshnik on February 6, 2025 ended in disaster for Russia. According to Forbes, the second missile of this type, which may have been aimed at Kyiv, exploded before it even crossed the border. In addition, on June 5th, flying objects were seen in the skies over Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and the aggressor country, Russia. There was speculation online that these were Russian experimental Oreshnik ballistic missiles. At that time, Kazakhstan's Ministry of Defense denied the report about the missile and emphasized that there had been no recorded violations of Kazakhstan's airspace.
Former
advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine, Oleksiy Arestovich, has once again found himself at the center of a scandal after new public statements, which are now being actively spread by Russian propaganda media. In an interview with Russian journalist Ksenia Sobchak, he stated that the first thing he would do if he were the Ukrainian leader would be to go to Moscow to see the dictator Putin. Arestovich said that during a meeting with Putin, he would announce that he was changing the direction of Ukraine's foreign and domestic policy so that the aggressor country would be satisfied.
Ukraine will never again pose a significant and direct threat to the Russian Federation from its sovereign territory.
The former advisor to the office of the President of Ukraine is ready to hand over Ukrainian territories to the Kremlin regime.
I give up 4 regions and Crimea. I do not recognize them as Russian. I hand them over under conditions similar to those between West and East Germany. I bring in troops and station them along the border.
The former Ukrainian official also recalled the brotherly peoples, Russians, Belarusians, and Ukrainians.
For me, they represent a symbolic unity. Honestly, it pains me deeply that Ukrainians, Russians, and Belarusians can kill each other.
Arestovich said he would be ready to lay flowers for Russian soldiers if Russia would do the same for Ukrainian ones. And if they refrain, he will do it himself. Earlier, Arestovich responded to Ukrainians noticing that he despises the Ukrainian people.
I despise Ukrainians. I'm telling you to your face that I despise you.
Oleksiy Arestovich fled the country shortly after the full-scale invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation and has been abroad for a long time now. His statements regularly provoke widespread public reaction. And in May 2025, he was sanctioned by Ukraine for spreading narratives that echoed Russian propaganda.
President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine will become a member of the European Union regardless of the position of Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban. The president expressed confidence that the people of Hungary support Ukraine in any case.
Ukraine will definitely join the European Union anyway, with Orban or without his involvement, because this is indeed the clear choice of the Ukrainian people. The Prime Minister of Hungary is simply slowing down this process right now.
Zelensky believes that Hungary's blocking of Ukraine's further movement toward the European Union is connected to domestic political reasons. The Ukrainian president also strongly reminded that Ukraine has successfully fulfilled all the necessary technical requirements to officially open the very first cluster in the EU accession negotiations, and further commented on the significant possibility of changing procedural rules so that EU expansion would not require a unanimous decision. Volodymyr Zelensky noted,
Changing the established procedure means finding a viable way to move forward effectively when the vast majority, all countries except Hungary, strongly support Ukraine and clearly understand how absolutely necessary this is.
In turn, the European Commission says that opening clusters for Ukraine without Orban's consent could be considered, but the corresponding decision must be made by the EU member states. It should be noted that Viktor Orban recently reiterated that Hungarians do not want to be in the same union as Ukrainians, so as not to share their fate. And according to him, the fate of Ukrainians is supposedly to be alongside Russia. The Hungarian Prime Minister also believes that Ukraine is not a sovereign state, since its bills are paid by the countries of the European Union. Meanwhile, a rally of thousands took place in Budapest against Prime Minister Orban. Viktor was once again criticized for his friendship with Putin. The Hungarian Prime Minister was accused of failed economic policies, high inflation, and being excessively close to Moscow. Next year, elections will be held in Hungary. According to analysts, for Orban, who has been leading the country since 2010, this will be the most difficult campaign. U.S. President Donald Trump hinted to journalists that he has indeed decided to supply Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. He made this statement on Monday, October 6th. Journalists asked whether the head of the White House had already made a decision regarding missile deliveries to Ukraine. To this, Trump replied,
Yes, I guess they've made a decision, overall, if you think about it. I think I want to find out what they will do with them, where they will send them, probably. I would have to ask that question.
When a journalist clarified that Tomahawk missiles have a range of approximately 1,500 miles, which is about 2,400 kilometers, Trump noted that he does not want an escalation of the war in Ukraine.
No, I know. I would ask a few questions. I don't want an escalation. Putin threatened the U.S. with a break in relations if Washington supplies Ukraine with long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles.
There were questions related, for example, to the discussion of issues regarding the supply of new weapon systems, including long-range, high-precision systems, such as Tomahawks and so on. I have already said that this will lead to the destruction of our relations, or at the very least, the positive trends that have begun to emerge in these relations.
If Tomahawk missiles are transferred to Ukraine, they will be purchased from the U.S. and paid for by NATO countries. This was reported by Axios, citing a source close to the Ukrainian government. At the same time, the source said that in recent weeks, representatives of the Trump administration have expressed concerns about whether Washington would be able to control how Ukraine uses these missiles. Let us recall that, according to The Telegraph, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, during a closed-door meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York, asked him to transfer Tomahawk missiles. Zelensky stated that they would help convince Putin to come to the negotiating table to discuss a peace agreement.
Russia would consider the supply of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine by the United States as a serious escalation. However, the Kremlin hopes that U.S. President Donald Trump wants a peaceful resolution. This was stated by the press secretary of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin, Dmitry Peskov. His statements are being reported by Russian media. He emphasized that it is important to wait for clearer statements if there will be any, and he reminded that Putin has already expressed his position on this matter.
Rumors circulate and then the statements are made. At least that's always been the case under the Biden administration. We know this very well. This time we'll see. But as for Moscow's official position, it was laid out quite clearly and unambiguously by President Putin at a very recent meeting within the framework of the Valdai Discussion Club. Everything was stated clearly there. This would be a serious escalation, which, however, will not be able to change the situation on the front lines.
He also said that we are talking about missiles that can also be equipped with nuclear warheads. He implied that this is yet another reason for a possible escalation. Let us recall that in a comment to Russian propagandist Pavel Zarubin, Putin stated that the supply of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine would destroy the positive trends in relations between Russia and the United States.
I have already stated that this will inevitably lead to the complete destruction of our important relations. Oh, duh. At any rate, the positive trends that have begun to emerge in these relations. So I'm just saying what I think. And how things will actually turn out depends not only on us and not only on me.
At the same time, the commander of the Akhmat Special Forces, Abdelaudin, expressed confidence during a live broadcast of Olga Skabiva's propaganda show that Ukraine would receive long-range Tomahawk missiles. Meanwhile, Trump stated that he, quote, has made a decision regarding the supply of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. He added that he still wants to find out more. What will the Ukrainians do with these missiles? Where will they send them? A new version of the Neptune cruise missile was unveiled in Ukraine. It was presented during a demonstration of the capabilities of the Ukrainian defense industry to NATO representatives. This version has likely not been mentioned in open sources before. This was reported by Defense Express. What stands out first is the unusual bulge in the middle of the body, which is why the missile was nicknamed the pot-bellied Neptune. The missile is significantly different from the standard R-360 anti-ship missile, as well as from its modification known as the Long Neptune. The bulge is likely fuel tanks, which allow the missile's range to be increased. It should be noted that the standard R-360 missile has a range of 280 kilometers, whereas the Long Neptune can hit targets at a distance of 1,000 kilometers. Defense Express notes that it is quite logical to assume that the pot-bellied Neptune has a range of 500 kilometers. It also cannot be ruled out that the new missile has a larger warhead than the base version. Earlier, the representative of the Ukrainian Navy, Dmytro Pletenchuk, reported that Ukrainian Neptunes struck the enemy more than 50 times last year, but this was not always made public. He also added that the combat use of the Neptunes demonstrates successful results. The Ukrainian Navy is the sole operator of this system. Meanwhile, Ukraine may receive long-range Tomahawk missiles. US President Donald Trump stated that he, quote, has apparently made a decision regarding the supply of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. He added that he still wants to find out what the Ukrainians will do with these missiles and where they will send them.
In temporarily occupied Crimea, a large oil depot in Feodosia has been hit, which essentially serves as a major oil transshipment terminal. The fire has been burning for a second day. The smoke plume is visible from space. Out of more than 30 fuel tanks, only about 22 remain, because this isn't the first time it's been hit. And it is specifically tankers from Russia's Shadow Fleet that refuel there, noted the representative of the Ukrainian Navy, Captain Second Rank Dmytro Pletenchuk. According to him, civilians are already having problems refueling their cars. They're going through a find a gas station quest. He also said that not enough time has passed yet to objectively assess the results. And the results of such attacks are measured not only by the immediate consequences at the site of impact.
They are measured by the consequences for the future usability of these facilities. In other words, this should affect the supply balance, primarily for Russian troops in one of the directions with fuel, which of course is very important for the front.
Notably, the strike on the oil depot in Crimea happened on the eve of the birthday of the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. On October 7th, he turned 73 years old. According to his press secretary Dmitry Peskov, Putin will spend it at his workplace. His plans include a Security Council meeting and international calls with congratulations from leaders of other countries. Let us recall that in temporarily occupied Crimea, one of the first major attacks on the Crimean Bridge by the Ukrainian armed forces took place on October 8, 2022. At that time, using a truck packed with explosives, about 250 meters of the highway surface were destroyed, and 7 tank cars of a freight train caught fire. Traffic on the bridge was completely halted, which was the first such incident since it was opened.
Residents of the Voronezh region heard the sounds of explosions. Drones were flying there. The Russian Federation stated that Ukrainian drones tried to attack the Novovernez nuclear power plant. At the same time, they themselves claimed that the drone was suppressed by Russian military forces. According to Rosenergodom,
during the night of October 6th to 7th, a combat unmanned aerial vehicle of the armed forces of Ukraine was suppressed by technical means in the area of the Novovernez nuclear power plant. As a result, after colliding with the tower evaporative cooling unit of the operating power unit number 6 at the Novovernez nuclear power plant, the UAV detonated.
There was no destruction and no one was injured. A dark mark was left as a result of a detonation. Earlier, on October 6th, explosions were heard in Tyumen. The regional government's information center reported that 3 drones were found and neutralized on the grounds of an enterprise in the Antipino district. Local residents, however, claimed that they heard 2 explosions during the attack. At the same time, videos appeared on social media showing fire trucks racing through Tyumen. According to information from local residents, the Tyumen oil refinery may have been the target of the attack. It is worth noting that Tyumen is located about 1,900 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Also, on the night of October 6th, there was a blackout in the Russian Federation. In the town of Krynicy in Russia's Bryansk region, local residents reported power outages. A large fire broke out at a local thermal power plant there.
Looks like the CHP plant is on fire. The flames are about as high as a 5-story building, give or take. There were 4 loud explosions.
In Russia's Belgorod, explosions were also heard, after which the city lost power.
Behind the blue building.
Well, the power's out again.
There's no power here. There's no power there either. But the sign is still lit. The traffic lights aren't working. It's dark everywhere here. This is the city center.
At that point, the governor of Belgorod region, Vyacheslav Gladkov, confirmed the power outage.
Lyudmila Putina tearfully tried to convince Vladimir Putin that his second term as president was a mistake. This is mentioned in an excerpt from the book The Tsar in Person by Roman Badanin and Mikhail Putin, published by the agency Novosti on the 73rd birthday of the Russian dictator. The excerpt describes a meeting between director Igor Shadkan and Putin with his first wife in a hotel room in Mexico in the summer of 2004. During the conversation, Lyudmila Putina tearfully argued with her husband about the mistake of his decision to run for a second term. At the meeting in the Mexican hotel, according to Shadkan's acquaintance, there were 3 people present, the Putins and the director. Shadkan tried to convince his old acquaintance that the country was heading in the wrong direction and that Putin was showing autocratic tendencies. And then something happened that the guest did not expect.
Lyudmila had a breakdown. Together with Shadkan, she began to argue with her husband, insisting that he should not have run for another presidential term. Lyudmila was almost in tears. Putin was taken aback, as was Shadkan.
The director left the hotel, realizing he had witnessed a scene he was never meant to see. It was also clear that Lyudmila's fate was grim, since she had exposed family disagreements on an issue that was fundamental for Putin. This was the true end of the family, the authors of the book write. The formal end came much later, on June 6, 2013. At that time, Vladimir and Lyudmila Putin, during an intermission at the premiere of the ballet Esmeralda in the Kremlin, gave a joint interview in which they publicly announced that their 30-year marriage had effectively ended by mutual decision.
Our marriage has ended because in reality we hardly ever see each other. Vladimir Vladimirovich is completely absorbed in his work.
At the same time, Putin explained that his work involves complete public exposure, which not everyone can endure. Putin celebrated his birthday for the first time in the company of military personnel in St. Petersburg. First, with them, he visited the Peter and Paul Cathedral, the tomb of the Russian emperors, FSB Director Alexander Bortnikov, Defense Ministry and General Staff leadership, and military grouping commanders.
I decided to start our meeting here because this is the resting place of those people who, in essence, created modern Russia.
After visiting the cathedral, Putin held a meeting with the military leadership. Putin stated that he made the right decision by starting his war of aggression against Ukraine. And this is despite the enormous losses. Already in the first year of the war with Ukraine, Russia's losses exceeded the losses of the USSR and Russia in all wars after World War II combined.
The crucial decisions that were made in February of 2022 were absolutely correct and remarkably timely.
In his report to the military, Putin exaggerated the successes of the Russian army at the front. The dictator stated that in 2025, the army, as he put it, liberated almost 5,000 square kilometers and 212 settlements. However, the figures announced by Putin are about 1.5 times higher than the visually confirmed successes of the Russian army. According to data from the Ukrainian analytical project Deep State, this year the Russian army has captured about 3,000 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory. Interestingly, Putin's trip to St. Petersburg was not announced in advance. After the arrival of 2 presidential planes in St. Petersburg on his birthday, Nevsky Prospect was paralyzed by traffic jams rated 10 out of 10. The Russian leader has visited his hometown on his birthday multiple times, but this was the first time he met with the military on that day. According to Kremlin reports, for the past 2 years, Putin's official birthday events have taken place at the Novo Ogaryovo residence near Moscow. Putin and Kabaeva's sons live under cover identities. The media report that their last names have been revealed and photos have also been shown. Journalists Roman Badanin and Mikhail Rubin write in their book, The Tsar in Person, that the 2 sons of Russian President Vladimir Putin and Alina Kabaeva are registered in documents as Ivan and Vladimir Spiridonov. The information was published on October 7th by the Russian Telegram channel of the agency. According to the journalists, the invented surname may have been taken from the patronymic of Putin's paternal grandfather, Vladimir Spiridonovich. The authors of the book write that Kabaeva and Putin spend a significant amount of time together with their 2 sons at the president's residence in Valdai. According to the journalists from Proect, a separate wooden palace was built there for the former gymnast and her children, as well as a spa center, a children's recreation area, an extensive park, and a staff of attendants. The book also published, for the first time, photos of Ivan and Vladimir, who do appear in public from time to time. Journalists write that Putin's daughters from his first marriage, Maria Vorontsova and Ekaterina Tikhonova, also live under assumed surnames. The second daughter's surname likely comes from her maternal grandmother, Ekaterina Tikhonovna Shkrebneva. Earlier, Russian media reported that Putin's sons are likely being prepared for a career in sports. They train with professional coaches in gymnastics, swimming, and chess. In addition, they are starting to be assigned teachers for general education subjects.
In the American city of Chicago, Illinois, a large-scale operation by federal agents to combat illegal migrants is ongoing. U.S. President Donald Trump has officially authorized the deployment of approximately 300 National Guard soldiers to help restore order and actively fight crime. Videos have appeared online showing federal agents in balaclavas forcefully pulling migrants out of cars, putting them on the ground and loading them into vans. In addition, during the raids, officers search homes, bring residents outside, and detain them. Representatives of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security state that the operation is aimed at protecting citizens and combating organized crime. However, local authorities, including Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, call the actions of the federal government illegal. Together with Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, he has filed a lawsuit against the Trump administration. Officials believe that the deployment of National Guard forces and the raids by federal agents constitute interference in state affairs and a violation of citizens' rights. The mayor of Chicago noted that local authorities did not request the deployment of troops within the city and that such actions are unconstitutional and dangerous. Johnson also announced that all available means would be used to protect the residents of Chicago. It should be noted that Donald Trump is tightening the fight against migrants. He has repeatedly tried to deploy federal troops into the city of Portland, Oregon. And in June, the Trump administration also sent National Guard troops to Los Angeles, where federal agents indeed carried out large-scale raids.
Special Operations Forces fighters thwarted the Russian advance in the Kupiansk direction. A group of soldiers from the 8th Separate Regiment of Special Operations Forces prevented the enemy from advancing through their actions. This was reported on the Telegram channel. It is noted that with the help of strike FPV drones, the enemy was driven into a building, after which operators cleared several buildings where the enemy was located.
As a result, 3 Russian servicemen were eliminated and the rest were forced to retreat.
In the Sumy region, the Ukrainian armed forces used drones to cut off Russian units' ground lines of communication and supply routes, including water. This is stated in the latest report from the Institute for the Study of War. It is noted that the occupiers continued offensive operations in the Sumy direction, but made no progress. Analysts also noted that because Ukrainian drones have cut off all Russian ground lines of communication and supply routes, the northern group of troops holding positions in Yunikivka has been without water for 8 days now. That's why the Russians are collecting rainwater. The report also notes that the military command in the Yunikivka area consists of officers without combat experience. They are stationed at rear headquarters 20 kilometers from the front line and refuse to evacuate the wounded and the dead. At the same time, Russia has depleted more than half of its stockpiles of armored vehicles and artillery, said OSINT researcher Jumpiai, who analyzed satellite images and open-source data. To continue the war against Ukraine, the Russians have started pulling old equipment out of storage. For example, they have restored almost 5,000 tanks out of the pre-war total of 7,342, leaving only 19% of the pre-war number of vehicles in storage. The artillery depots have also been significantly depleted. Out of the pre-war 23,000 units, including mortars and anti-aircraft artillery, only about 39% remain at the bases. They have restored 14,000 units. At the same time, Jumpiai notes cases where Russians abandon military vehicles for civilian cars and go on the offensive. This is a phenomenon the researcher links to the likely limited availability of operational military vehicles.
Russian dictator Vladimir Putin has effectively admitted the failed advance of the occupying forces in Ukraine. He acknowledged the minor successes of the Russian army at a meeting with the leadership of the Ministry of Defense and the General Staff on October 7th. According to Putin, since the beginning of this year, the aggressor country's army has occupied 4,900 square kilometers of territory and 212 settlements. These figures indicate a slowdown in the pace of the offensive. The stated numbers, in fact, amount to less than 1% of Ukrainian territory. Despite the Kremlin's constant and often exaggerated claims of strategic successes, the advance of Russian forces is truly insignificant compared to the immense amount of resources the aggressor country is currently spending on the ongoing war against Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov stated that the significant momentum for resolving the ongoing war against Ukraine, which had initially emerged after the crucial meeting between Russian dictator Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump in Alaska, has now been completely exhausted. In the spirit of Russian propaganda, he blamed the exhaustion of this momentum on supporters of fighting the war to the last Ukrainian, among whom he included Europeans. Ryabkov also commented on the issue of supplying Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. He clearly stated that without the necessary software and the powerful launchers, the missiles themselves are essentially just empty shells. In a manipulative tone, the deputy head of the foreign ministry of the aggressor country called on the US to approach the issue of supplying Tomahawk missiles with sobriety and reason.
We, of course, strongly urge the American leadership and the United States military to approach this entire complex situation with extreme sobriety, profound sensibility, and a deep sense of responsibility.
Let us recall that on August 15th, a meeting took place between American leader Donald Trump and Russian dictator Vladimir Putin in Alaska. However, it did not lead to any progress in resolving the war. On the contrary, the aggressor country continued to escalate the situation. Soon after, Trump stated that he was disappointed with Putin's actions. In Russia, the fuel crisis continues, caused by successful Ukrainian drone attacks on Russian oil refineries. Amid the crisis, many gas stations have started operating at a loss, and private gas stations are on the verge of shutting down altogether. The Russian Fuel Union has warned that the profitability of filling stations for gasoline has become negative. This happened due to reduced production and missed fuel delivery deadlines, and buying gasoline has become more expensive than selling it. The shortage of gasoline is being felt in various Russian regions. Recently, the fuel crisis has also reached Yekaterinburg. There, gas stations are limiting gasoline sales and restrictions are even being imposed on diesel fuel. Most gas stations in Yekaterinburg are selling only 30 liters of gasoline per customer. In addition, according to the Independent Fuel Union, the gasoline shortage has affected the Ryazan, Nizhny Novgorod, Saratov and Rostov regions of Russia, as well as the Volga region, the Far Eastern regions and the temporarily occupied Ukrainian Crimea. For example, on the Crimean Peninsula, the limit has been reduced to 20 liters of gasoline per vehicle. Notably, the occupying authorities in Crimea are trying to justify the fuel shortage by blaming weather conditions, which allegedly limited the operation of the ferry crossing. As reported by Reuters, the aggressor country is trying to solve the fuel shortage problem at the expense of Belarus. According to the publication, the export of Belarusian gasoline to Russia by rail in September increased fourfold compared to the previous month. Overall, Belarus increased shipments of gasoline from its oil refineries to Russia by 40%.
US President Donald Trump made a new statement regarding the resolution of the Russia-Ukraine war.
We have resolved 7 wars. We are close to resolving the 8th. I think we will resolve the situation with Russia.
The American leader noted that ending Russia's war against Ukraine may prove to be more difficult than achieving peace in the Middle East. According to Trump, an agreement to establish peace in the Middle East is already nearing conclusion. On his social media, Trump wrote that Israel and Hamas have signed the first phase of the peace plan.
The first step toward a strong, lasting, and eternal peace. All parties will absolutely be placed on completely equal terms.
According to the US president, this absolutely means that all hostages will be released very, very soon, and Israel will withdraw its troops to the agreed-upon line as a crucial first step toward a lasting, long-term, and enduring peace. In an interview with Fox News, Trump clarified that the hostage exchange will likely take place on Monday, October 13th. He added that he might travel to the Middle East at the end of the week, possibly on Sunday. Hamas in turn confirmed that a deal had been reached and noted that it highly values the efforts of the brotherly mediators in Qatar, Egypt and Turkey, as well as the efforts of US President Donald Trump.
We announced the achievement of an agreement that entails a cessation of the war in the Gaza Strip, the withdrawal of occupying forces, the delivery of humanitarian aid, and a prisoner exchange.
Also, according to media reports, Trump guarantees an end to the war and initially the withdrawal of 70% of Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip, to be followed by a complete withdrawal. An unnamed US official told Axios that the war in Gaza is over. The hostages will all be fully released 72 hours after the Israeli cabinet officially approves the proposed agreement. In Kazakhstan, a man who fought against Ukraine as part of the Wagner private military company and then tried to flee to the United States was sentenced to 5 years in prison. This was reported by the publication Orda on Wednesday, October 8th. The article states that Kazakhstani citizen Timur Proliev enlisted in the Russian military in the fall of 2022 to participate in the war against Ukraine. He fought from November 2022 to October 2024. In particular, he took part in the assault on Bakhmut. In 2023, he received a Russian passport but did not renounce his Kazakhstani citizenship. After leaving Wagner, the Kazakhstani went for medical treatment first to Minsk and then to Ufa. After that, he tried to travel to the United States. Proliev was detained on January 4th in the state of Texas when he attempted to illegally cross the US-Mexico border. A US court sentenced him to a term that he managed to serve before being deported. On May 7th, the former Wagner member was deported to Kazakhstan. There he was, found guilty of a serious crime against peace and security. Meanwhile, in Uzbekistan, a participant in the war against Ukraine was convicted. He signed a contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense to pay off debts from a failed match. The court sentenced the 28-year-old native of the Tashkent region to 4 years and 50 days of restricted freedom on charges of mercenarism for participating in the war against Ukraine on the side of the Russian army. This was reported by the Uzbek service of Radio Liberty. The name of the convicted man is not disclosed. The man said,
He found an option in Moscow through the internet. They promised to cover all my expenses. I arrived on May 30th, 2024, met with Armenian managers, but they told me the fight was cancelled and that I had to return the money. I didn't have any money, so they took my passport.
At the Russian Ministry of Defense, they promised him he would be repairing equipment, but after signing the contract, he was sent to Luhansk for military training, and in August 2024 he was sent to the front where he suffered a shrapnel injury to his eye and subsequently lost it.
Announcer, the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, made a statement about the possible transfer of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine.
Volodymyr Zelensky, I did not receive a refusal from Trump regarding the sale of Tomahawk missiles. The United States will work on this issue at the technical level.
Announcer. In a comment to journalists, the Ukrainian leader noted that he had raised this issue back during the administration of President Joe Biden, but at that time it was refused.
Volodymyr Zelensky, this is now an important signal, strengthening Ukraine by all possible means. And one of the important ones is the Tomahawks. Such things can strengthen Ukraine and force the Russians to sober up and sit down at the negotiating table.
Announcer, the president also spoke about the successes in the use of Ukrainian long-range weaponry. Yes, thanks to the use, for example, of the Palyanitsia missile drone, the armed forces of Ukraine have begun striking dozens of military depots on Russian territory. According to Zelensky, a second positive result was recorded thanks to the use of the Ruta missile drone, when, for the first time, it managed to strike an offshore platform at a distance of over 250 kilometers.
Volodymyr Zelensky, the greatest success was Lyuty and Firepoint. There was a massive deployment of up to 300 units, and this was a serious operation. We understand that Ust-Luga and Primorsk are within reach. What happened is truly a great success.
Announcer. At the same time, as the president emphasized, according to Ukrainian data, the enemy's gasoline shortage amounts to up to 20% of their needs. In the past week, Kyiv has deployed a couple of Neptune and Flamingo.
Volodymyr Zelensky, the corresponding results can be analyzed independently. We are not saying that this pair is being used on a massive scale. We're simply saying that it is being used, and there are already the first tangible results from this particular weapon of ours.
Announcer. Publication Welt writes that Ukraine used 3 Flamingo cruise missiles during a strike on a Russian intelligence base in occupied Crimea. According to the publication, 2 missiles hit the target while another fell about 100 meters away from it. The explosion created craters at the site with diameters of up to 15 meters.
Turkey may significantly reduce its consumption of Russian gas. According to Reuters, by the end of 2028, the country plans to meet more than half of its gas needs through increased domestic production and greater imports from the United States. For Russian and Iranian suppliers, this threatens a reduction in purchases. The article notes that US President Donald Trump is publicly pressuring allies, including Turkey, to reduce their energy ties with Moscow and Tehran. For example, during a meeting with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan at the White House, Trump urged him to abandon Russian energy resources. A focus on domestic gas production will also strengthen Turkey's energy security and support its ambitions to become a regional gas hub. Analysts from the publication write, Ankara aims to re-export to Europe the imported liquefied natural gas and its own gas, while the Russian and Iranian blue fuel is planned to be consumed domestically in Turkey. Notably, Russia remains the largest gas supplier to Turkey, but its share of supplies is gradually decreasing. Meanwhile, Turkey continues to make efforts toward ending Russia's war against Ukraine. On October 7th, Turkish leader Recep Tayyip Erdogan held a telephone conversation with Russian dictator Vladimir Putin. According to the press service of the Turkish president, Erdogan stated that diplomatic initiatives must gain momentum to end the war with a just and lasting peace. He added that Turkey will continue to work towards achieving peace. It is worth noting that although Erdogan maintains diplomatic relations with Russia, he has repeatedly stated that he supports the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine. Putin admitted that missiles from the Russian Federation shot down the Azerbaijani plane. For the first time in a long while, the Russian dictator held a meeting with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev against the backdrop of a sharp deterioration in relations between the two countries. The meeting took place in the capital of Tajikistan, Dushanbe, where the CIS summit and the Russia Central Asia summit are being held. It is known that the Russian and Azerbaijani leaders had not met since October of last year. The cooling of relations was linked to the crash of the Azerbaijani plane, which was shot down by Russian air defense, as well as the mass detentions of Azerbaijanis in Russia. Ilham Aliyev initially demanded an official apology from the Kremlin for the downed plane, compensation for the damages, and punishment for those responsible. However, Moscow did not admit fault for a long time. During the current meeting, Putin did finally admit that Russian air defense fired 2 missiles at the Azerbaijani Airlines plane, but at the same time he blamed Ukraine, saying that Russian air defense was hunting for Ukrainian drones. Of course, the Kremlin leader did not miss the chance to make excuses. Putin claimed that the missiles supposedly did not hit the plane directly, but exploded several meters away from it. According to him, the aircraft was allegedly struck by debris. Putin also promised to compensate for the damage caused by the plane crash.
Undoubtedly, everything required in such cases, in such tragic cases, yes, will be done by the Russian side regarding compensation, and a legal assessment will be given for all officials involved.
It should be noted that earlier Russian propaganda tried to blame Ukraine for the plane crash. Let us recall that on December 25th of last year, an Azerbaijan Airlines passenger plane crashed near the city of Aktau in Kazakhstan. In the plane crash, 38 out of the 67 people on board were killed. On his birthday, Russian dictator Vladimir Putin visited the Peter and Paul Cathedral in St. Petersburg, which serves as the burial place of many Russian emperors and members of the imperial family. There, he met with representatives of the Ministry of Defense, the General Staff, and other military officials. According to Putin, he decided to begin the meeting in the burial vault because it is where the emperors who founded Russia are buried. Putin himself described the meeting as pleasant and interesting. At the same time, the Telegram channel Kremlin Snuffbox reported that the location of the meeting was allegedly not to the liking of the head of the Russian General Staff, Valery Gerasimov. The channel cites a source who claims that Gerasimov was apparently not very comfortable meeting with Putin, essentially on top of graves. He supposedly considers it a bad omen, the channel writes. The same channel claims that the Ministry of Defense called such concerns strange superstitions, and Gerasimov is allegedly quite worried that he might indeed be dismissed, and that several key people in his immediate circle are facing very serious problems. It should be particularly noted that the Russian dictator, Vladimir Putin, has long had various health problems, which he very carefully and meticulously hides. In particular, Russian media have widely reported that Putin may currently be suffering from both pancreatic and thyroid cancer, and also from Parkinson's disease. Earlier, Vadim Skibitsky, deputy head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, stated that the Russian dictator is ill both morally and physically. At the same time, according to him, information about the Russian leader's health is being concealed. The aggressor country Russia once again launched a massive strike on Ukraine during the night of October 10th. The Russians attacked energy infrastructure facilities. Many regions are experiencing power outages and rolling blackout schedules are in effect. In particular, in Kiev, the energy infrastructure and residential buildings were damaged as a result of the attack. In one of the apartment buildings, a fire broke out due to a drone strike. According to the city administration, after the shelling in the capital, 12 people are known to have been injured. 8 of them have been hospitalized, while 4 are receiving outpatient care. In addition, certain restrictions are in place for the operation of the subway. Thus, the Green Line is transporting passengers between the Sirets and Vidubichi stations. Trains are not running between the Slavutich and Krasny Kutir stations. In Kiev and the Kiev region, emergency power outages are in effect. Other regions have also been affected by Russian strikes. In the Cherkasy region, infrastructure has been damaged due to a Russian attack. Debris from a downed missile fell on an apartment building in Kaniv. In the Sumy region, emergency power outage schedules have been introduced due to attacks on the energy sector. The Russians have once again struck Zaporizhia. There, a 7-year-old child who had been hospitalized after the attack has died. An approximate route of the missiles and drones from last night has been published online. Meanwhile, Russia has claimed that its facilities were attacked using Flamingo cruise missiles. Propagandist Telegram channels are spreading information about an allegedly downed missile. Notably, Kremlin-affiliated public pages do not specify how many missiles were used or when this occurred. Earlier, President Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Ukraine would respond to strikes from the aggressor country. In particular, he directly addressed Russian officials, sternly warning them of the urgent need to seek bomb shelters if Moscow does not cease its aggressive attacks. The Russian dictator Vladimir Putin was allegedly advised to arrest the head of the Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Sergei Lavrov, for treason. This was reported by the Telegram channel Kremlin Tabakerka. The channel notes that at the very least Lavrov is facing dismissal. Supposedly earlier, his deputy Sergei Ryabkov said that the momentum for resolving the war against Ukraine, which emerged after the meeting between Putin and Donald Trump, has been exhausted. According to Kremlin Tabakerka, the Russian financier Kirill Dmitriev allegedly conveyed to Putin the message that the foreign minister is an enemy and a traitor, and Lavrov is being accused of committing treason, and that he interfered with the establishment of Russian-American relations. The channel writes that Putin has supposedly familiarized himself with the accusations and instructed competent people to investigate them. And Lavrov himself has allegedly been in a distressed state and in constant fear lately. As political analyst Abbas Galyamov notes, at some point the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry was indeed removed from Russian-American negotiations. And a number of issues were assigned to the aid of the Russian dictator, Dmitry Ushakov and Kirill Dmitriev.
There were times when Ushakov actually flew to Moscow and Lavrov wasn't even at the table. That is, Putin was there, Ushakov was there, Dmitriev was there, the interpreters were there, but Lavrov was not, even though the table was large, and they could have added another table if needed.
At the same time, Galyamov notes that soon after this, Lavrov returned to the public sphere and commented on a number of important issues. The expert does not believe that the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry is currently facing political problems. The political analyst suggests that Lavrov's current disappearance from the public space is likely related to his health issues.
During the meeting between Vladimir Putin and Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, a number of internet users paid attention to the Kremlin leader's footwear. In the published footage, it is clearly visible that Putin's shoes have hidden heels. The area around the heels is particularly noticeable. This is not the first time Putin has been seen wearing heeled shoes. Earlier, footage from one of Putin's press conferences was circulated online. In the photos and videos, the dictator appeared in shoes of a strange shape. As the Telegram channel Crimean Wind wrote at the time, the main feature of these shoes is that they have a hidden lift inside the last, a heel that is built in between the sole and a special insole. In such shoes, you literally have to walk on your tiptoes. This explains Putin's strange gait. Psychologist Dmitry Popov drew attention to Putin's height during his meeting with US President Donald Trump in Alaska.
There was an episode already at the end of the meeting between Putin and Trump, when the fake Putin was standing and fidgeting with his legs. It was possible to guess that he had some kind of device there which started at his foot and ended on the floor. And this device was about 15 to 20 centimeters tall.
Blogger Alexei Ryabkov also analyzed Putin's height during the meeting in Alaska.
ChatGPT posted this photo from the meeting, and they say please analyze the height. And ChatGPT says the height is, Putin's height is 183 centimeters. Can you imagine what kind of platform shoes Putin must be wearing? How uncomfortable must it be for him to walk in them? They added 15 centimeters to his height.
There is no official information about Putin's height. Unofficially, it is known to be around 170 centimeters. However, there is also data suggesting that Putin's height may be closer to 152 centimeters. The dictator of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, continued to sing praises of US President Donald Trump during a press conference in Tajikistan on October 10th. He stated that the prestige of the Nobel Prize, which Trump did not receive, has been largely lost.
Whether or not the current US president deserves the Ukrainian prize, I don't know. But he is really doing a significant amount to effectively resolve such incredibly complex and challenging issues. Crises that have unfortunately lasted for many, many years, even entire decades.
The dictator also stated that the agreements between the US and the Russian Federation regarding Alaska remain in force.
We remain on, based upon the extensive discussion that took place in Anchorage. We are absolutely not changing anything for ourselves here. We firmly believe that some further significant work needs to be done on both sides, but overall, we remain entirely within the established framework of the Alaska Agreements.
On October 8th, Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov stated that the so-called strong impetus toward ending the war in Ukraine, which was set during the meeting of the US and Russian presidents in Alaska in August, has been largely exhausted. On October 10th, US President Donald Trump expressed his belief that Ukraine and Russia will soon hold negotiations for a peaceful settlement.
This is a terrible war, the worst since World War II. We have many reasons for them to do so, and I think they will sit down at the negotiating table very soon.
Earlier, Donald Trump stated that he was disappointed with Putin's actions, noted that Ukraine could reclaim its territories, and did not rule out supplying Kiev with Tomahawk cruise missiles. The United States is also urging EU countries to tighten sanctions, stop purchasing Russian energy resources, and confiscate Russian assets.
A MiG-31 multi-role fighter jet has crashed in Russia's Lipetsk region. This was reported by the Russian Ministry of Defense. It is noted that the aircraft crashed while approaching for landing after completing a scheduled training flight. The fighter jet's crew ejected. Russian aviation frequently suffers from attacks by Ukrainian drones. For example, at the end of September, the commander of the drone systems forces, Madyar, reported the destruction of a Russian Mi-8 helicopter by an FPV drone. And on September 20th, drones from the main intelligence directorate struck the occupiers' expensive Mi-8 helicopters and also destroyed 2 unique Russian B-12 Chaika anti-submarine amphibious aircraft. The largest damage to Russian aviation was inflicted by the SBU Special Operation Web, during which 117 drones were launched at 4 air bases on Russian territory. At that time, more than 40 strategic aviation aircraft were hit. The aviation industry in Russia is suffering not only from Ukrainian attacks, but also from sanctions, which are affecting civil aviation as well. As stated by President of the Ukrainian Aviation Association of Pilots and Aircraft Owners, Hennady Kazan, the aggressor country has long been experiencing a shortage of spare parts. And in order to somehow make up for this shortage, Russia uses parts from old decommissioned aircraft, which directly leads to breakdowns and accidents.
I'll say something simple and clear. According to various estimates, we believe there are 2.5 years left until the complete collapse of civil aviation in the Russian Federation.
The expert notes that 30% of the total fleet in the Russian Federation, namely foreign aircraft, are currently responsible for 90% of air transportation. This is an indicator of just how powerless Russia is when it comes to civil aviation.
Russians have begun to be massively blocked from leaving the country. The authorities of the Russian Federation have fully launched the electronic summons registry and have started to close the border to everyone for whom the military enlistment offices issue documents, according to Baza. According to the channel, the ban takes effect immediately after the summons is added to the digital registry and a notification is sent via Gosuslugi. From that moment on, the travel restrictions can only be lifted by personally visiting the military enlistment office. If the person does not appear within 20 days, they will be considered a draft dodger. They will lose the right to drive a car, the ability to register as self-employed, start a sole proprietorship, or take out a loan. Any transactions involving property will be frozen. Electronic summonses are sent not only to conscripts, but also to update personal information and to call reservists for training. Dictator Vladimir Putin ordered the creation of a unified digital registry of those liable for military service and electronic summonses after announcing mobilization in the fall of 2022, which, according to various estimates, led between 700,000 and 1 million people to leave Russia. In April 2023, the dictator equated electronic summonses with paper ones and approved restrictions against citizens who evade conscription. Earlier, the Italian agency ANSA reported that the European Commission may include in the 19th package of sanctions against Russia a ban on issuing tourist Schengen visas to citizens of the aggressor country. The reason is the large number of entries by citizens of the Russian Federation into the Schengen zone in the summer of 2025. The publication Bild reported that Germany wants to achieve a tightening of the visa regime for Russians. Back in September 2022, the EU suspended the simplified issuance of visas to citizens of the Russian Federation. Additional documents are required, processing times have increased, and the consular fee has risen to 80 euros. The Czech Republic has already banned entry for Russian diplomats and holders of service passports who do not have accreditation in the country. This was announced by Czech Foreign Minister Jan Lipovsky, who added that the Prague government supported his initiative